Welcome back to New Day. A Seattle native uses the Emerald City as backdrop for his best-selling, award-winning mystery novels. Every Day Above Ground is the latest in the series, featuring an Army sergeant helping other people stay out of trouble while dealing with his own. Welcome, author Glenn Eric Hamilton. It's so good to meet you. Welcome. And so we were just talking about, before we came on the air, why Seattle is such a great setting for, especially a mystery series. Tell me a bit about how you thought about that.
Absolutely. Well, part of it is that Seattle is, I think, relatively unexplored in the mystery genre. There are other authors, certainly very popular ones, working here, but it's such an untapped resource for its waterways, the city history, and especially, I think, the last 10 years when the city has really been reinventing itself. That was part of the inspiration for wanting to write about the city.
So how long have you lived here?
I had lived here. I grew up here, was born here. Grew up here and went to the UW, had a career here. And then about 10 or 12 years ago, my family and I moved down to LA. And it was really in visits back to Seattle that got me excited about writing about the city.
You missed us.
I did.
You missed us.
I still do. Still do.
So give us kind of a brief overview of the series, the protagonist and what the stories are about.
Sure. The main character is Van Shaw. And Van is an unusual fellow. He was raised by his grandfather, and his grandfather was a professional thief. So Van grew up cracking...
As they are,
yes,
you know.
Yes. Van grew up cracking safes and boosting cars and all manner of family-friendly activities like that. But he had a stronger moral center, and he and his grandfather broke ties when Van was in his late teens. He escaped into the Army. He served with distinction in the Army Rangers for about 10 years. And really the story of the series is Van's homecoming to Seattle and him finding the way to merge and be happy with his past life and his current moral center.
Yes, sometimes when you make a change, trying to stay connected to your own roots can be a challenge. So what number book is this in the series?
This is number 3 in the series. Just came out.
So when you started writing about him, did you think it would be a series, or did he just kind of live on?
Early when I was writing, I thought it might be what we call a standalone novel, just a single novel. But very soon I realized that I wanted to tell a series because I wanted to explore more about Seattle. I wanted to build a cast of characters that we could revisit over time and watch them change. And that's the exciting part, is having characters in the background come to the forefront, and we can see them evolve as well.
So how do you go about doing the research that you do to make sure that the Seattle area is represented I don't want to say to its best light as in its flattering, but in its most accurate light?
Sure. Well, some of it is location scouting. I get to come back here on vacations and weekends and explore the city, ask questions from folks who have been in the thick of it from some of these changes along the way.
Give us some examples.
Well, I talk to local police officers, for example, local law enforcement. I'll talk with folks about all of the reconstruction that's going on around the viaduct and around Amazon.com and everything else that's really transformed our landscape here.
I'm thinking something spooky has to be happening in that tunnel they're digging.
You know what? That's not a bad idea. Maybe I'll use that for book 4. So.
I'm easily passing it to you.
But it is a matter of doing research. And then for the military aspects of the story, I have friends who have been in special operations. They check my work, make sure that not only the facts are right, but that the tone is right.
That the spirit is right of what's going on.
Absolutely.
What attracted you to that sort of background for this character? What does it give him that makes him especially interesting? Absolutely.
Well, I wanted him to, when he escaped from Seattle, I wanted him to be truly away from the city, so that when he came back, it was almost a little like an alien landscape to him.
That's as away as you can get.
It's as away as you can possibly get. And also, the happy accident of exploring that is that it gave this character who grew up with a very skewed moral compass a grounding on the other side of things, a very honorable way to live, a way to live that is for the people that you're serving with and those who are next to you, and protecting the individual who's going into battle with you. Right.
Which is the whole ethos, right? The guy next to you.
Exactly.
Or the woman next to you, I suppose, depending on what's going on. But so what did you learn about that area of our military service?
Well, first and foremost, it's an amazingly honorable and difficult way to live. I don't think that's necessarily news, but certainly in exploring it and talking with veterans of our armed forces, it gave me so much grounding in their life, not only in the service itself, but their challenges in coming back and reintegrating. And that's part of Van's story too. Is he's become a civilian as he's mustered out of the Army eventually in the series, but he's not necessarily a citizen. He's not sure where he fits.
Right.
And like a lot of veterans, he has challenges with understanding what the next phase of his career is, what his life is going to be.
Making that transition is so difficult, and for these guys, there's not even an ability to talk about what they've done or who they've done it with. So
Right.
how do you decompress and reimagine yourself? So that's part of his struggle as he goes
Yes,
forward.
yes.
Who are some of the other characters in the series?
Oh, we've got a few. We've got, to that end, we've got a character named Leo Pack, who served under Van while Van was a platoon sergeant in Afghanistan. He's a character that's introduced in the second book. We have Hollis Brandt, who is a sort of a comedic character. He's a smuggler who is a best friend of Van's grandfather. And he's
And you need a little comedy in this too, right?
Absolutely. And my favorite by far is Van's octogenarian neighbor, Addie Proctor, who is a short, stocky, take no prisoners woman of a certain age with a massive dog named Stanley.
Yay!
And Addie keeps Van on the straight and narrow.
I
She's
like
my
Addie
favorite.
already.
Yeah.
And I hope some of these will turn into movies because I love mystery movies. Is there any chance that this might happen?
Always possible. Always
Yes?
possible.
Do you
I mean,
know more than you're able to tell me in a special forces kind of way?
I really wish I did. But at this point, there have been inquiries along that line. They are challenging books to adapt because there are chapters that show Van at various ages growing up with his grandfather.
Oh, we can do that. We
So,
can take care of that. That's
yeah,
what CG
little
is
CGI,
for.
yeah, just
exactly.
age the actor
exactly.
down.
So who'd play the perfect Van?
Oh, that's a challenging one. Well, I think maybe Channing Tatum has the physicality for it. He'd be great. And then there's some, I could also see like a Jake Gyllenhaal, perhaps. Doing a
Oh,
good job
I
of
like
it as
the way
well.
you're thinking.
Yeah.
Why did you choose to write this in the first person?
I think it's more immediate, especially for things like action scenes and excitement and things of that nature. You can show a character confused, you can show them a little disoriented during things, and I think it heightens not only the fear of the character, but the fear of the reader. Whenever we read first person, we as the reader are putting ourselves self into that person. It also allows me to get into Van's head and understand his thoughts in a very immediate aspect. Now, whether or not Van is a reliable narrator to himself, whether he knows himself enough to do that, that's a question for the reader, and they get to figure that out.
So when you're actually writing it, though, you're writing like, say, chapter 1, chapter 2, and then you write the backstory as it comes?
Generally,
Okay.
yes, yeah, generally. In planning the book, I usually have a pretty good idea of what I want to say, and
Right.
how I want to say it comes out just straightforward in the writing. And if it's just too labored, if there's just too much of it, then I have to find a trick to
Right.
getting that in later on.
Okay. So let's move on to theme then, because last time we talked, you said that you don't usually find the underlying theme of the book during your initial draft. You find it during the rewrites. And the first book was it hit you that it was about forgiveness. Book 2 was about trust. How about book 3?
Book 3 is, and again, it came out in the rewrites. I wrote the book and then figured out, oh, this is what's happening in Van's life. This is what's happening with the characters around him. And then in rewrites, you tweak events or conversations to reinforce that. Book 3, I think, is really about responsibility. And Van has been a lone fellow for much of his life. He's driven himself as a teenager. He was largely self-directed under Dono. In the army, of course, he had brothers and the service to serve, but he was his own person, and he hasn't had a lot of family necessarily around him at any given time. At this point, he's been back in Seattle for a few months, and he's assembling, whether he's aware of it or not, this ersatz family around him, and he feels responsible for them. He feels like he needs to protect them and look out for them.
Who have been your biggest creative influences?
Oh, wow. Well, I grew up reading, because I lived aboard a boat, John D. McDonald, the Travis McGee series, was incredibly popular because that character lived aboard a boat as well in Florida. So that's almost required reading for everybody who's sailing. So John D. McDonald, Robert B. Parker, certainly, many of the classic authors. Then I came to know Sue Grafton, Sarah Paretsky, some of the more modern private eye fiction along the way. And of late, it's been authors like Dennis Lehane from Boston,
Meg Gardner's thrillers are wonderful as well. Michael Connelly, certainly in Los Angeles.
And so, what self-doubts do you run into as you're writing? Because I know you have them. Everybody has them, whether they'll admit or not. But more importantly, Glenn, how do you push past those?
I'm not sure I want to meet the writer who doesn't have self-doubts. that would be an egotism that I can't even comprehend. I definitely have self-doubts about the writing. Mostly, it's making sure that I'm treading ground that hasn't been done 100 times before, right? Am I writing something in my own voice that feels fresh, that feels new, to try to get this? And the other challenge I have is creating a plot that can be complex, but making sure that the reader is with you all the way along, that they understand what's happening and the different ways that players are maneuvering around the board, if you will, in trying to get what they want. And that's clear. If the motivations are clear to the reader, then I've won.
Right.
That's what I want. As far as pushing past it, it's the butt in the seat rule. You just have to sit down, produce the pages. It's I forget who said this. It might have been Joyce Carol Oates, but I can fix anything except a blank page.
Yes.
Right? And that's very true. Is you have to write it first before you can fix it.
Yeah.
And so getting that first draft out is very important.